As a social institution, marriage is failing. Almost 50% end in divorce, and 20% that stay together describe themselves as unfaithful or unhappy. And of course, this assumes that the people who say they are faithful and happy are telling the truth. With almost 50% of all households formally or informally separated, many conservative commentators like Ben Shapiro, for example, would describe this as an extreme social ill. Particularly in the black community, for example, there is a well-documented correlation between single-parent households and incarceration rates. Now, this doesn't imply causation to begin with, but as so often conservatives are guilty of, they want reality to adapt to tradition rather than tradition to adapt to reality. Meaning that you can't put the genie back in the bottle and reverse engineer society into a conservative utopia. You have to ask yourself, why is this social institution failing, so we can provide solutions to the millions of single parents right now. Now, I would argue that marriage is conceptually flawed. Why do you need a state-enforced deterrence to validate your love? Why do you need legal, financial, and religious consequences to punish you should you have the audacity to pursue love elsewhere? A masochistic financial blackmail contract is not a form of love. It does nothing to enhance love, because by creating this artificial binding, you create a safety net which allows partners to exonerate themselves from suboptimal behavior. It decreases accountability. Ultimately, this is a cult ritual derivative from religious times. So why do we still do it? The Richard Dawkins selfish gene perspective on evolution outlines how human behavior is incentivized not to serve itself, but rather the propagation of our species. So basically, we may act in the interest of the future above ourselves subconsciously and manifest this into social constructs. And so from this perspective, you could see marriage as a useful tool to convert temporary lust between two human beings into a contractually binding commitment to essentially raise a child and guarantee intergenerational socialization. And this is why, as a social construct, marriage is popular amongst conservatives, because it forms a stable unit for capitalism. It encourages men to take on a provisional role, which makes them more likely to undergo subversive employment rather than entrepreneurial employment. It encourages women to conform to the norms of patriarchy, and of course, children are excellent consumers. Now, you may agree or disagree with these sociologically functional goals. I'm just trying to portray to you that marriage is more of a social engineering tool rather than a propagator of love. But I think it fails from both perspectives, because right now, it's not even a good engineering tool. It's not even a good necessary evil. I've already broken down the astronomical failure rates, but even those that stay together, I can attest personally, may be extraordinarily miserable. Now, conservatives would argue that the solution is to wind back the clocks and ensure more stable marriages. But again, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't reverse engineer society. If this social institution is failing, you have to adapt to contemporary reality. Traditions have to adapt to reality. Reality does not have to adapt to traditions. Now, it's absolutely a problem for a child to lack a stable masculine and a stable feminine figure. But a more proactive perspective would be to argue, why do we make the socialization of children contingent on the sexual satisfaction of two people? Why do children pivot to this arbitrary atomized unit and teachers who are mostly academic in nature? If children were integrated with more communal role models with athletic merit, vocational merit, ethical merit, entrepreneurial merit, digital merit, they would absorb a much broader range of skill sets and life experiences without having their developmental pathway contingent on the health of their parents or the knowledge of their teachers. And of course, in the social media era, atomization from society is not just an issue amongst children, it's a huge deficit in young adults. So you're really knocking two birds with one stone with this. And look, I understand engineering safe and standardized ways for children to integrate with strangers isn't easy, but it's easier than fixing a broken social institution and arguing for millions of people to stay in relationships they're unhappy with, which can also be incredibly destructive, or magically find a very stable partner to remarry with. As for love, now look, the merits of polygamy are up for debate, but right now, statistically, we are living in an unethical, non-consensual polygamous society. So perhaps engineering a more consensual and ethical way to manifest that would be more pragmatic. But even within a monogamous framework, I would argue you need to find better ways of engineering accountability within a relationship. Rather than one monumental commitment, maybe break it down into micro commitments that can be reevaluated the same way you would in an employment context. Maybe the process of romantic contractualization can be broken down into more incremental steps, which provides a foundation for more consistent accountability. Now look, people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson are hyper-traditionalistic niche, have an extremist religious disposition, and this rigidity of consciousness will mean they'll have very limited psychological resonance in the data dating market. So it might make sense for them to undergo the very traditional monogamous marriage, but that doesn't mean it will work for most people. But I've personally seen enough stagnant relationships, enough damaged people, enough people trapped, enough children suboptimally raised to understand that I'd rather define love and parenting on my own terms. And I'd advise you to do the same.